ESPN1420, ESPN1420.com. We welcome you into Bird's Eye View. Jay Walker, it is a Tuesday afternoon, and normally the highlight of Tuesday is the fact that it is Terrible Tune Tuesday. And during the Sports Gap at 4 o'clock this afternoon, Scott Prather and I will, as always, have a very bad song for you to listen to. However, today, a prelude to Terrible Tune Tuesday, as we welcome Ron Guidry to the show this afternoon. You know, I wish I'd have had a microphone on about the last 20 minutes, and it probably would have been some of the most entertaining 20 minutes any folks have ever had in the history of radio. And I realized as we were talking, and Ken Myers, former Ragin Cajun catcher, is here as well. Going back to when you were playing baseball at USL, then signed with the Yankees, had your career, all of your years going to spring training, your relationship with Yogi. Dude, you got some stories now.
Well, you can't do what I did and not have one or two good stories. I can tell maybe one of them, but I can't tell them all. But, yeah, you accumulate because you make such great friends along your travels. Along the way, you run into some very, very interesting people. And you never know who and when it comes, but you run into quite a bit. And I could tell you stories from the day that I got to UL, from the last day that I spent in Yankee Stadium. A lot of stories. I just told you one about that picture you just made me sign.
That's it.
I got to UL as a freshman in '69, and I had a 22-inch waist, and the smallest pair of pants they had was 24-inch. And when I got into my uniform every day to practice, I had to pin them with them big safety pins that you pin the diapers on the babies. So that was a chore to take an inch on each side and fold back and make sure that you didn't slide and have that pin open up and stick you in the side.
Yeah, you probably didn't want that to happen. I can't imagine, though, you being 18 years old and having a waist that small.
It was small, but, I was a small person. I ran quite a bit. Of course, I had just graduated high school, ran track. So you run quite a bit. So there was not very much fat on my body. It was, people kept telling me, you got to eat a little bit more. Look, dude, I eat more than anybody I know, but I burn it off too fast. So it was, I had to be careful, though.
I remember a conversation we had at a football game about a year ago. I saw you there, and it might have been homecoming, as a matter of fact, and I made a comment about football, and you talked about how much you loved the game of football, and that you had, you kind of wished you could have played when you were in high school. Of course, you realized that your future probably wasn't there.
Well, everyone has a few things that they regret not doing. And playing football was one of the things I always regretted not doing. I think I could have been a good football player. I had great hands. I always had good hands. I had very good speed. I didn't have a lot of size, and that was one of the things that always kind of made me hesitate to go out to play football. But deep down inside, I knew no matter what would have happened to me playing football, it would have never taken the place of baseball, because baseball was a game that I really loved. I really excelled at that. I didn't know how good as a football player I could have became. I know I could have become a better baseball player. So every time that, the football came around and you're looking at, well, I might go out this year. And then it didn't take long. You'd see the first guy come out with his arm or his leg or in a cast, and you're going, no, I don't think, not this year.
When I was 6, 7 years old, I knew that I was going to be the next Mickey Mantle. There was never a question in my mind. I even switch hit, very poorly, I might add, but I switch hit. Then by the time I got to be 10, I'm probably not going to be the next Mickey Mantle. At what age did you realize, hey, you know what? I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I'll be able to do something with it. how old were you when you finally realized maybe I've got a future in baseball?
Well, I was probably about 20 years old, and ironically, it's the same time that I'm not going to tell the story now because that's what I'm going to tell Thursday.
Okay.
I want to tell this story because I don't know if very many people know about why I left school, but I was about 20 years old when I realized that I might be able to do this.
And you were right.
Well, it took me a while. It took me a little bit longer than I thought, but it paid off in the end. Yes.
You know, there are a lot of folks, especially in the game of baseball, because there's a progression. You know, you sign, you play in this league, and then you play in that league, and then you play in that league, and then sooner or later maybe you get to the big club. And it's unlike football where, you sign, you're in training camp. If you make the team, you're on an NFL roster. The NBA's got the D League now, but they haven't always had that. Life in the minor leagues is tough. And I've talked to a lot of folks who played professional baseball that have said, life in the minor leagues, even if nowadays you get this nice big bonus, it's not like you're raking in a whole lot of cash while you're playing minor league baseball. I know there were a couple of times that you said, well, maybe I'm not going to do this anymore. But once you finally got there and you finally stuck and you arrived, you must have had to look back and say, well, I guess it was all worth it. But there had to be some times during that time, and I know that you and Bonnie had gotten married, and I would think that there were some, as you look back, you said, man, the reward was there. But boy, that journey had to have been tough at times.
It was tough because every year you're traveling somewheres new, and you have to start all over. When I get on the plane to go to play ball, I'm basically by myself. And Bonnie and I were married in '72 after my first year. So for the next 3 or 4 years, when I leave to play ball, that's all I do. Okay, but when we leave, she has to do everything that it consists of moving your family to wherever you're going. And when you get there, then you got to make a home. You got to make your nest. You got to do things. And the pay was almost non-existent compared to what it is today. Number one round draft choices are signing for $2 million, $2.5 million. The game is lucrative, but at that time, a number one choice might have been 30, 40, 50 grand was about as high as anybody was going. So by the time you get down to the 5th, 6th, 25th guys, you're not making a lot, and then you don't sign to play for a lot. But you're always looking at the rewards in the end are going to outweigh all of the hardships at the beginning. And as you go through them, yeah, it's tough, but it's also fun because it makes you save your money. It makes you spend it wisely. And everybody pitches in. Even when you get to a place and you got 25 guys in the same boat, everybody's pitching in $5 here, $5 there, and we all do things together because the more money you put in the pot, the more you can do. So, if there's 4 or 5 of us and we stop at the Kentucky Fried Chicken, we don't order separate orders. We put in each $4 or $5 and we get us a bucket of chicken. So 4 guys can eat on a bucket of chicken a lot easier than eating on a 3-piece meal. So, but it was fun, and we made a lot of friends that way also. We're still good friends with several people throughout the minor league eras, that Bonnie and I spent. We have some good friends in Florida, in Coral Springs, John and Anne Marie Calabrese. We have other friends that eventually made Major League somewheres and played. And, it's just that part of your life. Yeah, it was hard, but it was fun. It was as hard when you got to the major leagues because it's hard to make. I mean, you're really fortunate when you make it there because that's when you realize how good you have to be to get there. And then the next thing is it's not just getting there, it's staying there because everybody's trying to get the job that you got eventually. And only the fortunate that continue to improve and learn stay and then make a name for themselves. Because this is, don't forget that game, as much as we say the game, it's a business right now. And if you're not producing, you're gone. Somebody else is coming in. It's not like the Little League game where if you just got tired out, the coach put you a new guy and you played for a couple of innings until you got refreshed and you went back out. If you're not cutting it, you're gone.
Yeah, that re-entry rule in the major leagues. No, I'm kidding. It was all right. You knocked around for a few years, and before you finally got called up.
Yeah, 5 years.
5 years. All right, and so I'm sure that when you got there, you said, okay, in a couple of years, I'm going to win 25 games. I'm going to have an ERA under 2. I'm going to win the Cy Young Award. I'm going to finish second in the MVP voting. I'm going to beat the Dodgers in the World Series. I'm going to do all of these things. And you knew that a couple of years ahead of time, right?
No, I wish I could say that, but no. Well, things happen because as a minor leaguer, I started because that's what I always did. I did that at UL here. I was a starter. I had great seasons here, but when I got to the minor leagues, I didn't do anything spectacular for 3 years as a starter. The only thing that I did that not too many of us guys were doing was I had a strikeout per inning of pitching. So they look at that as, okay, well, that's a good thing. I'm not walking a lot of guys because I always had a lot of control. So, when you're looking at your stats and you're going like, well, his ERA was not all that good. He didn't win a lot of games, but, he had 100 innings, but he had 100 strikeouts and he had 15 walks. Well, that's a pretty good average. So they're looking at you, and as my first year in AAA, AAA is the area where I should back up. AAA is the area where you're going to start to meet some very good players and very good coaching. And my coach in AAA was Bobby Cox. So Coxie asked me to become a reliever. Don't start, relieve. Well, I had always started. Now you're asking me to do something else. Now I got to learn something else. Well, it was easy because I hadn't done anything as a starter to really be proud of. So I became a reliever, and I tried that. And then all of a sudden, you start excelling as a reliever. And that's how I eventually made it to the major leagues, was as a reliever. I was the closer for Bobby Cox in AAA. But then when I got to the big leagues, I got a pitch behind the closer that New York already has in Sparky Lau. Well, how are we going to do one thing if you already got something that's doing that job? So, ironically for me, Sparky and Dick Tidrow, who were in the bullpen, became two of my best friends in the game. And they're the ones that really turned me into the guy that I became. Sparky always referred to me as a monster because I always threw hard. I had that. But I never really had a pitch to back up and complement my fastball. Because after big league hitters see, they'll start hitting you. So you can't just rely on a fastball for 9 innings. You have to have something else. And he's the one who developed my slider. He's the one who showed me how to throw a slider. That's all he ever threw was a slider. He never threw a fastball. It was always slider. If he threw 10,000 pitches in the major leagues, it was 10,000 sliders. But the thing was, him and I threw so much a lot alike. It was very easy for me to pick up the way that he threw his slider. Now, granted, I threw harder, so mine broke later and it broke harder. Sparky threw 90 miles an hour, 91, 92. So, his sliders are going to be in the 88, 89, 87 range. If you're throwing 95 plus, then you're going to be throwing 88, 89, 90. some nights you're going to be throwing sliders harder than that. And I did. And all of a sudden, that's what separated me from, being an ordinary pitcher, was the slider. But ironically, when I started to throw it, I got stuck in the rotation because we had injuries. I had to make emergency starts. And then all of a sudden, one day, your manager goes, wait, there's something strange. We have a guy in the bullpen that's a reliever that's pitching into the ninth inning when we don't have any starters that are pitching into the ninth inning. We need to look at the way that we're running this thing. Let's put him in the starting rotation and see what happens. Well, what happened was my career took off. That's the fairy tale story to my beginning and ending. I was supposed to be a reliever, and to this day, I always said I would have probably been a better reliever all total than a starter. But I wasn't going to waste time picking which one I was going to do because all I wanted to do was pitch.
Back then, baseball used a 4-man rotation. Back when you were pitching, and so you got more starts, and you pitched more innings because you got deep into games a lot.
Well, we need to refrain and go back. Yes, it was a 4-man rotation when I got there, but by 77, when I was put into the rotation, that's when they started to go to the 5-man rotation, because it gave everyone that extra day of rest, and it really helps you when you're only getting 35 starts and you're looking at pitching close to 300 innings. If you're completing a lot of games, it's different today. But when you go back in the 70s and the 80s, the 5-man rotation, you had an average of about 34 to 35 starts, depending on what happened throughout the year. And if you're accustomed to pitching 7 innings, 8 innings all the time, 35 starts are going to give you well over 250 innings every year. So you start adding up those innings and you get tired. Your body gets tired. So if you were pitching on 4 days with close to maybe 42, 44 starts, then you were looking at that 250 became a 300 inning a year. Well, you got tired fast. And I had the privilege to pitch and learn how to pitch with guys like Catfish Hunter, Mike Torres, Ed Figueroa, Kenny Holtzman. Those guys were starters throughout their careers. And they would tell you, man, we did it, but I didn't like it. I would rather have those 5 days because I'd rather pitch a great 250 than a mediocre 300. So that's the time. And, even though I had my 35 starts, yes, I got into the 9th inning quite frequently. But that's how you are as a player. I had great relievers. The thing is, I didn't want them coming into my games anyway.
I was about to say, there's a lot of times you didn't need them at all.
Because you figure, look, I'm here. I'm just as good as who you got back there. So either I lose it or I win because I have just as much of a chance to do it as they have. Okay? But being a reliever it's a strenuous job. Because either you do it or you don't. You're only in there for maybe 1 pitch, 1 inning, 1 hitter, 2 hitters, 1 out, 2 outs. And the game's on the line every time that you come in. Well, I used to look at going out when I first started the game. That's the same way with me. It's a do or die thing. Either I win it or I lose it.
We are going to take this break. When we come back, Ron is going to tell us whether or not he really has webbed feet, and we're also going to get into to a book that I had about as much fun reading as anything I've ever read. Ron Guidry's our guest. It's Bird's Eye View. More after this on ESPN1420 and .com.